Hello and welcome back to the Malt Miller YouTube channel. I'm Martin, this is James. Today we are going to talk about pressurized fermentation.
So as we said, today's video is all about how you can get into pressurized fermentation and actually in a really accessible way. But before we get too far into the video, please make sure that you have subscribed to our channel, hit the bell for notifications so you can keep up with all of the content we're doing here on the Malt Miller YouTube channel. And why not head over to social media of your choice and give us a follow as well. So if you are watching this video having never fermented a beer under pressure before, Martin, what would be some of the reasons why we might do that, or what is pressurized fermentation?
Right, essentially, James, it's about fermenting your beer in a vessel which isn't letting the CO2 escape.
Right, okay.
So the CO2 that the yeast produces when it's munching on those sugars is held within the vessel. There's a number of different benefits. Now, I've dabbled in this over the years in terms of my brewing at home. I started off maybe 6 years ago with a product called the Fermentosaurus, and I've done a bit in keg, which is what a lot of people do. But there are now a lot of really accessible products on the market that are giving people at home the chance to do pressurized fermentation.
Pressurized fermentation is one of those things that has been around for a while now, certainly in the commercial world has been used for a long time, and there are some specific benefits which can be made by using this technique, which we're going to come on to. We're going to give you some absolute top 5 or 6 reasons why it might be a good choice for you. But like you said, Martin, right now we're in a position where getting into pressurized fermentation is really accessible. In the past, you were kind of limited, weren't you, with things like purpose-built stainless steel unitanks, which if you're not sure whether this is something you want to get into, it's a big investment, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's also conicals out there where you could pressurize and modify so you could actually do this type of thing. But now this range of products that's available off the shelf for a reasonable amount of money, which makes it just everyone have the chance to try this at home. Yeah. Minimal investment. So James, we've kind of alluded to it a little bit. What are these products you've got here in front of us?
Well, Mark, these are some of the range of PET plastic pressurized fermenting vessels from Keg King. We've got 3 here, which probably represent the most accessible way to get into pressurized fermentation in the market at the moment. So we've got the Fermenter King Junior, and we have a 10-litre version here at the front. We have the larger 20-litre version, and then we have the affectionately named Chubby, which is the 30-litre version, and they all work in a very similar way. Ultimately, they are a plastic vessel which is rated to be able to hold 35 psi of pressure. Okay?
Yeah.
On the top, we have connectors that are the same as a keg.
So you've got one in, one out?
Yeah, we've got gas post in and we have product out. There's a PRV on the top as well, so that the pressure will never build up to the point where it could cause problems. And inside we have a floating dip tube. Now, we'll come on to these in a bit more detail, and actually we're going to have a follow-up video to this, which will be us actually putting some of these to the test under a brew, which I'm sure you're going to love because it's definitely a beer style that you're a fan of. But we'll come on to that more in a minute. What's really important about these products though is that they are incredibly accessible price points. So if you're not entirely sure whether this is something you want to invest a large sum of money into, or if you've already got a bigger unitank and you want to do some test batches to see how particular ingredients perform under pressure, maybe yeasts or hops or whatever it might be, these are a great way to get into the world of trying out new techniques and options for pressurized fermentation.
I mean, to me, these look very familiar because they've got all the same kind of fittings on the keg.
Yes, exactly. So you can serve from them.
Oh wow, so it's not just a fermenter. Nope. You can also serve for a lot cheaper than the price of a stainless steel keg or a stainless steel fermenter. Absolutely.
So they're an awesome option, like I said, if you are trying to get into this world. But before we venture too far into the specifics about these products, it's probably be worth us taking some time to talk about some of the reasons why you may want to ferment your beer under pressure.
So tell me, James, why would we want to ferment under pressure at home?
Well, Mark, there's a number of reasons. And I'm going to kick it off with my first, and that is that fermenting under pressure limits your yeast's ability to produce esters.
Right.
Now, you might be thinking, well, actually, I want my yeast to produce esters. And in many cases you may do, but there are certain yeast styles which you want to absolutely limit their ability to generate esters and actually undesirable flavors, namely lager yeasts, which brings me on to point number 2. Now, fermenting under pressure really comes into its own when you're trying to make lagers, because you can use traditional lager yeasts and not have to worry as much about temperature control. Because when lager yeast operates outside of its, or at the extremes of its temperature range, that's when it will produce sulfurous off flavors and stuff that we don't really want in our finished beer, okay? But fermenting under pressure significantly reduces that, which means we can ferment our lagers at warmer temperatures. You might be thinking, why do I want to ferment my lagers at warmer temperatures? That brings us on to our third reason, right? And these three are all intrinsically linked, but the third benefit of fermenting under pressure means that because we're limiting off flavors under pressure, we can increase temperature when we're fermenting, which means we can speed up fermentation.
Right.
So when we're fermenting a lager, we can go from start to finish in a far shorter time because we can allow the yeast to actually munch through all of the sugars in the wort at a faster pace without the worry of those off flavors being generated. As somebody that loves a lager, surely that's appealing to you, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to learn more about this and to also have a go at it if this really works.
I know, right? And again, we're going to come on to that stuff, so just sit pretty there, Martin, because my list isn't done yet. I've got some other benefits. And it's all now about oxygen. Now we know that oxygen post pitching of yeast is actually a challenge to the brewer. If we end up with too much dissolved oxygen in our finished beer, it spoils our beer. We get oxidized, muddy soup. What we can do with a pressurized fermentation vessel is, in the case of the Keg King range here, we can serve directly from these. So we're never having oxygen in contact with the finished beer because it's fermented under pressure with carbon dioxide and no oxygen getting in, okay? But also because we have a pressurized fermentation vessel, transferring from this vessel to another keg or another smaller serving platform like a growler or a mini keg, like a 5-litre keg or something like that, actually it's really, really straightforward. And again, 0 oxygen pickup.
That's 4 points, James.
Yep.
You said you got 5 or 6.
Okay, well, the last big one is actually all about carbonation, Martin. Because we are fermenting under pressure, we're going to have a certain amount of carbon dioxide left in here at the end of fermentation. Now, when we move this into a cold environment, such as a kegerator, or if we're going to put it into a fridge to cold crash it, a huge amount of that carbon dioxide is going to be absorbed into the beer. So we're going to end up with a beer that is, if not entirely, almost entirely naturally carbonated.
So pretty much ready to serve.
Absolutely.
So beer with no limited off flavours, produced faster.
No oxygen.
No oxygen, no muddy soup, naturally carbonated, ready to drink.
Yes,
Why haven't I been doing this sooner?
As with everything, right, within homebrewing, it is going to be about you experimenting and trying what works for you. You might find, because I know you're probably sat there thinking, awesome, well, this is going to work for my hazy hoppy beers because I'm going to limit my oxygen pickup, and it's going to work really well for my lagers because I can speed up fermentation. Now, you don't have to limit this process to any particular beer style. You are going to want to play around and do a bit of trial and error, because some styles it's not necessary, right? You know, if you're making a best bitter, for example, actually there's not a huge amount of reason at this point to ferment under pressure, other than you might want to speed it up a little bit. Yeah,
but you're still going to want to retain some of those esters.
Exactly, some of the fruity esters that you might get from the yeast, okay? So it's going to be a bit of trial and error for brewers. Try what works, see which styles work best for them with this method, which again leads me back to the reason why we believe these are an awesome way to get into pressure fermentation, because you're not outlaying a huge amount. You can have it as a complementary system to your other fermentation platforms that you've already got.
So James, is there a specific pressure that I need to be fermenting at? Because I know these have got PRV,
Yep.
but is that going to be enough to use that, or?
Well, the PRV there is a safety measure, okay? These are all pressure rated to 35 PSI, 2.4 bar, that kind of realm, okay? Now, that actually is too high for us when it comes to fermenting under pressure. Once we get to about 15 PSI, we are running the risk of stalling our yeast and putting it under too much pressure. So what we have to do, Martin, is include an additional item onto these, which allows us the ability to control the amount of pressure that's inside. If you've not heard of one of those before at home, you have definitely. It's called a spunding valve, okay? Now, a spunding valve we fit onto our system, and I'll show you how we do it with these in a minute, and we then set the pressure that we want inside to be. And a bit like a PRV, when it gets to that pressure, it will release it.
So show me what we need to put with these then.
So for this system, we actually just need something called a spundy, which
All
is actually developed by Keg King to work with their systems. And if any of you at home are familiar with kegging already, you'll know what a gas post, a gas disconnect looks like. So it's very similar to that. It's got a gas disconnect sort of fitting on there.
And that's going to go on the
gas post.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's the one with the notches in.
Yep. So we've got a little dial there and then a gauge on the front, okay?
Looks like a regulator.
It does, it is. Ultimately, it is like a very miniature version of a regulator, but it's only letting gas out, not in.
Right,
Right?
okay.
So remember, we don't want oxygen to get in there, so we're using this one way, gas out. And it does just simply hop on to the fermenter, you dial it in, job done. Now we've got our spundy in place, what you can then do is set the pressure based on the beer style that you're fermenting. With a lager, you want to probably go to the upper end of your pressure setting towards that 15 PSI. With something like a hazy or hoppy beer, actually we're going to want to go right towards the other end of the scale. And the reason for that is that there is a risk because, like we said, you limit ester formation, you are going to limit the formation of some of that hoppy aroma that you want from a hoppy beer. Now, the big benefit that we can't forget is when we are making a hoppy beer using pressurized fermentation, the benefit there is low oxygen. Okay, it's not so much the other benefits of speeding things up. Now, low oxygen means that we can serve from the keg or package from the keg after the fermentation's complete.
There's a lot of things going on in my mind now in terms of what I can brew and ferment in these. So it's kind of like, I'm thinking lager, 12 PSI, then actually doing the conditioning in here as well, so I retain some of that carbonation and have that natural kind of Budvar tank system.
Yeah.
Really exciting stuff.
I know, right? It's really exciting. What I love about the Keg King range as well, certainly this part of their range, is that if you want to do a test batch and try 2 different yeasts,
Yeah.
it's really accessible. Do a 20 litre batch, use 2 of the 10 litre fermenters, 2 different yeasts from the same wort, and see which one you prefer at the end before you then go on to create a bigger batch of that. For me, that's really where this stuff comes into its own.
I guess there'll be some questions and some people saying a few different things about these, because I'm asking myself, it's like, okay, so I'm doing a hoppy beer, how am I going to dry hop if this is pressurized?
Yep, absolutely. Now, with these systems, to dry hop, you are going to have to depressurize the system, add the hops, repressurize the system. But the fact that you've got gas posts on there and a PRV valve means that you can do that incredibly simply, right?
Yeah, and I guess because you've got pressure in there, you've got CO2 in there, there's going to be a blanket of CO2, so that momentarily kind of taking off the lid
Yep.
negates kind of like the
Yeah.
cost saving you're getting on a vessel of this price point
yeah.
against buying a unitank with a drop-in system.
With like a hop dropper on it. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the other question kind of in relation to those hoppy beers I have is, this one's silver, these ones are clear,
Yes.
light strike.
Yes. Now, if you are really worried about light strike, then you could coat the clear ones, or you just make sure they are kept in a light-free environment.
Yeah, I mean, put a blanket, put a sleeping bag around them, or put them in a fridge, keep them away from light.
Yeah.
Or worst case, shh,
Get
the old spray can out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, okay.
One other thing that we haven't really touched on a huge amount is that with these, they come with a floating dip tube. So that means as well, when it comes to serving or transferring, you are taking your beer, your finished beer, from the top, okay? Because the silver ball, the float ball, keeps the dip tube at the top. So any trub,
Any hops,
any hops, any trub, any yeast that's settled out is all at the bottom. You're not drawing your beer from there, drawing it from the top.
Fantastic, what a great idea.
And like we've said, at an awesome price point as well. You can get into pressurized fermentation for very little outlay. Try it, see how you get on with it, and then if you choose to, move on to a bigger system, you know, like a stainless steel unitank or one of the other pressure fermenters that Keg King actually do.
Yeah, because you can actually see if this is having the impact you want it to have on your brewing, and then is it worth taking that big jump, I guess?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thanks for showing these today, James.
Well, doesn't just stop there, because actually, Martin, I've got something lined up for us to do, which is going to be the next video that you're going to be able to see. We're going to brew a beer, and we're going to ferment it in 2 of the 10-litre ones.
Do a split batch, do a test, and see how different it does really taste. Hey, we hope this has piqued your interest in pressurized fermentation and that you have a go at it at home.
There's tons of information out there about pressure fermentation, and it can feel a little bit like a minefield of, you know, where do I start with this? How do I do this? What benefit is it to me? Hopefully this video has tried to answer some of that for you and give you the confidence to take the first step. If it hasn't just yet and you're still interested, make sure you subscribe to our channel, because the next video in our little series about pressure fermentation using the Keg King products is actually going to be me and Martin brewing one of our favourite styles of beer, which is a Czech lager, and we're going to ferment it into 2 of the little 10-litre fermenters using some different yeast styles and see how we get on. All that remains is for me to say thank you for watching. Make sure you are subscribed to our channel and you've got notifications turned on. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course TikTok.
If they want to see you dancing.
Yeah, and have a great brew.